Welcome back to OpenLine. We're looking at the 2016 pork report. It's put out every year by the Beacon Center. We have with us Justin Owen and Mark Cunningham with the Beacon Center. Government waste, that's the overarching topic. As we went to break, Bob called and he asked about corporate welfare, corporate handouts. We've certainly talked about that issue. Again, there debates on both sides, but what did you come up with in this report?
So we have several examples, especially at the state level, where we have these programs to give grants and cash handouts and tax breaks to individual companies. Now, we believe in low taxes, and we believe that we should encourage job growth in our state, but we don't believe that government should pick winners and losers between one company and another. It's like the umpire giving one team an extra at bat in a baseball game. That's not the role of government. It's to create a level playing field, and companies should, their value is what they provide customers. It shouldn't be based on who they know in government in terms of how much money they get. And so we spend millions and millions of taxpayer dollars every year, $3 billion in the last decade, just in Tennessee on corporate welfare. So it is a huge problem.
And what specifically did you find in this report? Did you find, what's a good example?
So the Lifeway store, which used to be down here pretty close on Broadway, the state government gave them $3.5 million to move like a half a mile, and they gave them the whole nice campus. They did all these nice things, gave them sidewalks, helped them build their buildings. So this is an example of an area where everyone wants to buy. You see buildings on Broadway going for $20, $30 million all the time, and the government said, you know what, we're going to give you $3.5 million to just move across town. And I mean, and it's not the first example of this, and this is the worst kind of corporate welfare. I mean, we've seen that with Bridgestone, where you're moving from one part of the state or even sometimes the same city to another, and we're giving you a lot of money. Sure, if a company comes from out of state, we disagree with it, but I can kind of understand their argument. It's wrong, but I kind of understand it. Now, when you talk about in the same city, it's the same tax base, it's the same people paying taxes, and yet we're giving them our dollars to do that, to these rich billionaires and millionaires. So this was an example that we see far too often of some place moving within the same city and taking our money to do it.
And again, what the argument there would be just like with the Titans. If Tennessee were to take a hard line and say, no, we're not going to give you any incentives, then they leave. And in the case, I think, with Lifeway, they were threatening to go to another location. Certainly Bridgestone was. You're right, you pay incentives to bring people here to Nashville from outside of Nashville, but what if there's a headquarters here and they're threatening to leave?
Right.
Do we need to invest, that would be again the word they would use, invest to keep those jobs here?
I don't believe that's the government's role. Those companies are going to stay here or move here for a variety of reasons, because we have low taxes and low regulations, and it's a place where you can thrive. Tennessee ranks very high on a lot of scales when it comes to our competitiveness with other states. If we focus on those policies that really matter, then those companies are going to come here anyway. And if other states would follow suit, this should be a national issue. It should be something that all states say, we're not giving any more taxpayer money to corporations. We'll create environments where it's easy for you to start and grow a business, but we're not going to give you those handouts. Because the reality is, the vast majority of jobs are created by Tennessee companies who are already here and who start here. Yet almost exclusively, these handouts go to companies that are moving into the state, or these mega corporations that create some 2% of all the jobs in our state. So the vast majority of handouts go to the fewest job creators, actually. It's just an unfair system.
And we keep talking about incentives and how it creates jobs. So what amount of money is worth it for a job? I mean, VW is one of the biggest ones in Tennessee. They got like $800 million, and they're paying more than $60,000 per job of our taxpayer dollars. Is that a good deal? Because I mean, at some point they have to tell us what a good deal is, because we haven't heard that. It's, oh, it creates jobs. So we gave $5 million for 3 jobs. Is that a good deal? So the idea that just economic development in general is great is just it's wrong-headed, and it's I mean, these people are uninformed about the issues. So show me I mean, we need to figure out what we consider to be a good investment. I mean, obviously we are against it in general because we don't think small business should be hurt at the expense of big businesses. But we need to figure out what a good investment is so we can go from there. So we say, okay, well, this is a $50,000 per job. Let's not do this. And that's the issue. And we don't hold these companies accountable. They say they're going to create 400 jobs. They create 40 jobs. It doesn't matter because there's no contract. And there's a lot of things that we need to do to at least make the system more transparent and better. I mean, we can all agree on that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah, more transparent. You have a philosophical point of view on this, that these kind of incentives are inappropriate and wrong. What have you seen over the course of the years that you've done this? You've done it now 11 years. Are you seeing more of this type of corporate welfare, whatever you want to call it? Or are you seeing less? Do you think we're going in the right direction, or in your opinion, the wrong direction?
We're definitely seeing more, unfortunately, despite some great examples of this being a huge problem, like Hemlock Semiconductor. You might recall a few years ago, planned to open a plant in Clarksville dealing with solar energy, but because of China, volatile markets, and all of this stuff, they shut the plant before they even brought people in to start working. So hundreds of people lost their jobs, the plant sat empty, and we lost $95 million in taxpayer money on that deal. Yet then we turn around, just this year we handed another $30 million out to a company that legislators voted on without even knowing what the company was, because they couldn't be told, because it might screw up the deal. So here you have legislators voting blind, and then we don't know what the accountability is. How many jobs does this company say they're going to create versus how many do they actually create? And as Mark said, until we have that transparency, until we know what they say they're going to do and then hold them accountable for it, we shouldn't be spending any more money on this at all.
And Justin makes a great point. We've actually teamed up with a liberal group called Good Jobs First. And essentially, they said that Tennessee is one of the worst states in the country for transparency. Their program's not transparent at all. So we're kind of on the more free market side, and we're teaming up with a group who would spend the money completely differently, but agrees that corporate handouts are not the way to go. And the first step is to become more transparent. Once that happens, then we can have a discussion about, well, we don't think it should happen at all. But taxpayers at least deserve to know how their money is being spent.
Politically, there is enormous pressure to bring in a company and create jobs. And so I guess that may be a reason you've seen this increase over the years. It's harder and harder to bring in a corporation. Corporations know that every governor in every state wants to boast, I brought in X company. And so they just sit back and wait.
And when you give them that handout, they'll proudly proclaim that you're the reason they came to your state to create those jobs, even though the reality is they're coming for a variety of other reasons. It's all of those other policies that we've worked hard as a state to enact that is luring them here. But if I give you a $100 million handout, you'll be sure to say that it was because of me that you came into my state. That's part of the problem.
So you say you've seen this grow in the 11 years you've done this. Where do you think we will be 11 years from now? Does it continue to grow? Or are you optimistic it changes? Or where do you think we are 11 years from now?
Well, we just launched a project to really address this head on. EndCorporateHandouts.com. You can actually go onto the website and look at every example of government or of government handing out these grants and tax credits for the last decade. So we're trying to educate Tennesseans about this through things like the Pork Report and the EndCorporateHandouts.com website, so that they can be more informed and help us weigh in on this issue. And I'm hopeful that as more Tennesseans realize that this doesn't work, that we're handing out way too much money, and in terms of per job, a lot of hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases, and have a real discussion about whether we should continue this.
And to piggyback off that, we just recently did a poll that showed with iCitizen, which is a polling group here in Nashville, that showed that 70% of people in the state of Tennessee are against giving handouts to corporations, no matter what. So the idea is that most people on our side, we just need to make sure we're explaining it, because a lot of the politicians are saying, oh, creating jobs, incentives, things like that. They're using words that are not actually correct. Really what it is handouts. And our job over the next couple of years is we're going to educate Tennesseans about it, and hopefully in 11 years there won't be such a thing as handouts in Tennessee.
Let's go to David. Hello, David.
Howdy.
Hi, go right ahead.
How about the TBI? Do you investigate their financial records, what they're allotted by the legislature, and how much they collect in the firearm transfer fees, and how much they're spending on resolving the firearm transfer denials that occur in this state? The ratio is 1 in 5 million denials to arrest.
So the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. I didn't notice that. What about? Has
That's
that come up?
interesting. I'm not aware of that, and we will definitely look into that. Again, these are great examples of when we get a tip, we will go look into it. We do actually, the comptroller audits every state agency, so anytime, whether it's the TBI or any other agency, if there's something in those audits that, these audits are like 200-300 pages long, so people aren't reading them. Fortunately, we will read them, and then we'll call out the most egregious things that we find in those for taxpayers. They're not in this year's Pork Report, but we'll certainly continue to look at them.
Brian, hello, Brian.
Hey, good evening. First
Go right
of all, the TIF financing, that goes back to when I was a young guy in like the 90s and stuff, tax increment financing. And that's where the big money is. That's where the really big money is. And not much of that money is coming back to the schools. Most of that, oddly enough, is being re-put into more TIF financing. It's like on a snowball kind of thing.
That's right.
That is a perfect example, and you, Ben, have done a lot of work on this issue, exposing it. When the purpose of TIF is to redevelop blighted areas and then take those areas that have been downtrodden, build them up, and then use the eventual tax proceeds that you get off that to put them back into schools and roads and the general fund. But what's happening is every dollar just about that is taken through TIF is put back into developers' pockets, is given to more developers. And I know a lot of people thought back in the 80s and maybe even the early 90s that downtown Nashville was blighted. But if you come to downtown Nashville today, it's the It City. It's very difficult to find even a block in downtown Nashville that would be considered blighted, yet we're still spending millions and millions of dollars to redevelop the downtown area to make it better through this tax increment financing.
I know that was a big part of your report last year.
That's right.
And there has been some change. There's more transparency, and there have been some bills that have been passed that deal with that. But that was a big issue last year. What else? All right, let's go through a few more things here in this segment. What else do we need to point out?
So we got some bike racks here in Nashville. You think,
So that's public art. Okay, so let's talk about that.
Art's a strong word. Yeah.
So the bike racks. All right. Okay, go ahead.
So bike racks. You think we need 4 new bike racks across downtown. We looked online and found we could get some pretty high-end bike racks for about $5,000 total for all 4. Yet taxpayers had to spend $100,000 on 4 bike racks just this last year. Mark's favorite, I think, is the art that's now down by the river, the Cumberland River art.
Yeah, I feel like we need to say so-called art in front of all these things. But yeah, the idea is I think this was my vote for Pork of the Year. Unfortunately, the people didn't agree with me. But by the Cumberland River over there, by the amphitheater, they have a new statue of. It goes like this. It's a statue of the Cumberland River directly next to the Cumberland River. So if you want to pay $350,000 to see a statue of the thing and the actual river itself, and this is a great investment. But this is an example of something like, oh, I love public art. And people say that this is ridiculous. Like, this should make us angry that you're putting a statue. I mean, that's like a Rocky Balboa fight. If that was a real thing, you put a statue outside. Let me look at the statue rather than watch the fight. So that is what this is. And this is just, we spent $6.4 million on public art in Nashville. A lot of it done by out-of-state artists, and a lot of it looks like garbage. So I think that's
now, again, there are people who would disagree with you.
I don't trust those people.
It's supposed to kind of generate conversation and get a public discourse going.
But can't we do that privately? There's private art in a lot of other cities. Why can't they be the ones who do it? You want to give them land to do that, fine. For them to do the sticks over there by Peg Leg Pork and all those things. This is. I think most people who understand art think this is garbage. So I think the idea that and I'm not an art person. I'll give you that, but I think the idea that this is a good use of our money, paying out-of-state artists to do stuff that is objectionable at best. It is not a good use of our money, and these things are just common sense things, like you don't put a statue of a river right next to a river. So I think we just need a little bit more common sense when it comes to art, and we love to see private companies doing it, because that happens in a lot of other cities.
And so, all right. See, you don't mince words there. What sort of reaction do you get? Yeah, obviously, there are people that applaud you. Do you get some tough reactions sometime as well? What
obviously,
do you get?
somebody thought this was a good idea because they spent the money on it. They put this thing up. So there are definitely people who believe that this is a good thing. But I think if you go and ask the average taxpayer on the streets, when they look at it, like, well, I think that's kind of odd. But then when you tell them that it's $350,000 of their hard-earned money was spent on it, then they get outraged.
And the whole point is art is subjective. Everyone has different opinions of art. So should we be doing subjective things and putting our money into these things that are subjective? Is a half roller coaster, is that a good use of our money? Is that a beautiful sculpture? I don't think so. And a lot of other people don't. But the point is, it is subjective, and that's a great point that you make. So we shouldn't be funding subjective art.
It's conversation.
Yeah.
Look at that. All right, so we'll take a break. Come back for our final segment. If you want to call, there's the number 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.